Her example of duty, service, and dignity, the monarch, and of course, the matriarch of her family. The deeply moving moments we witnessed here today. The state funeral in Westminster Abbey right behind us, where Queen Elizabeth was married and where she was crowned. 2,000 mourners inside the Abbey here, presidents, prime ministers, monarchs, and of course her family. The Queen's successor, King Charles III, the message he left on his mother's casket. 3 generations, Princes William and Harry together, along with William's 2 oldest children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. And then, of course, the final journey from here in London to Windsor. Crowds on both sides of the route, silence, and then moments of spontaneous applause. They could not hold back their love for their Queen. Thousands of police and military personnel along the way. At Windsor Castle, the solemn ritual at St. George's Chapel, the committal service for the Queen. The symbol of her reign ending, the crown removed from the top of the coffin, the wand of office snapped in two. The Queen's coffin lowered into the royal vault, joining her parents, her sister Princess Margaret, and of course her beloved husband, Prince Philip, who died just last year. It was their promise, whoever died first would wait for the other. Tonight, you will hear the Queen's piper, who played for her nearly every morning, play for the Queen one final time, and the mourners then singing, God Save the King. Tonight, the final farewell, the final journey for Queen Elizabeth. Tens of thousands lining the streets from London to Windsor to witness this moment in history and to pay tribute to a queen who promised at 21 to devote her life to service. The pallbearers from the British Army, 8 soldiers from the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards carrying out the coffin, placing it on the state gun carriage. The procession as the Queen's coffin is carried to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral, the first since Sir Winston Churchill. The carriage followed by King Charles III and members of Britain's royal family, including the Queen's daughter, Princess Anne, by her mother's side for this entire journey. Her grandsons, Prince William, now the heir to the throne, and Prince Harry, walking together again in a show of unity for their grandmother. Queen Consort Camilla and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, traveling together. William and Catherine deciding to bring their 2 oldest children, George and Charlotte, looking out through the windows as London paid tribute to their great-grandmother. Inside the funeral service, 2,000 guests in attendance. Leaders from all over the world. Britain's current and former prime ministers, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, and Tony Blair. Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden walking in, holding hands. The casket entering the Abbey as the choir sings. On top of the casket, the royal standard, the sovereign's orb and scepter, and the imperial state crown, the crown she first put on at the end of her coronation right here at Westminster Abbey nearly 70 years ago. The wreath on the coffin with a handwritten note from her son, King Charles, in loving and devoted memory, Charles R. The flowers cut from the gardens of the royal residences, including myrtle, grown from some of the myrtle in the Queen's wedding bouquet in 1947. Of course, married to Philip for 73 years. Prince William, now joined by Princess Catherine and their children. Prince Harry with Duchess Meghan. The view overhead revealing the scope of the ceremony. Among the hymns, Psalm 23, sung at the Queen's wedding in 1947 to Philip. Theirs was the longest marriage in royal history. The Archbishop of Canterbury.
Her late Majesty famously declared on a 21st birthday broadcast that her whole life would be dedicated to serving the nation and Commonwealth. Rarely has such a promise been so well kept.
Tens of thousands gathering in nearby Hyde Park to watch the service and pay their respects. Near the end of the service, across the United Kingdom, 2 minutes of silence for their Queen. Across Britain, hundreds of thousands moved. Then the congregation singing God Save the King. Queen Camilla singing next to the King, clearly moved by the moment. Harry and Meghan standing directly behind. The Queen's piper, who played for the Queen nearly every morning below her window, now playing Sleep, Dearie, Sleep. The Queen, who was married and crowned here in Westminster Abbey, leaving for the final time. The procession through the streets of London, Royal Navy sailors pulling her coffin, a nod to the Queen's volunteer service during World War II, and of course her role as Commander-in-Chief. The procession passing beneath the Arch and Horse Guards parade, the guardsmen filling the space as the massive crowds await on both sides. A short time later, the Queen's coffin would pass the statues of the Queen's mother and father, parents who could never have imagined her 70-year reign, the longest in British history.
I felt as she passed, her parents were looking at her and were saying, "We're really proud of you. You've done a great job."
The Queen's coffin passing by the royal balcony at Buckingham Palace, where just this past June she last waved to the crowds here. The procession making its way toward Wellington Arch, where the Queen's coffin was transferred from the carriage to the state hearse, the design approved by the Queen for the 25-mile trip to Windsor Castle. The royal family looking on, her great-grandchildren Prince George and Princess Charlotte standing in front of Prince William and Princess Catherine, King Charles saluting as the hearse pulls away. Princess Anne again in the car behind the coffin. It was her mother's wish that her daughter be near every part of this final journey, from Balmoral back to London, and now as she leaves for Windsor for the last time. And then the 2-hour drive to Windsor. Along the route, her coffin seen through the large clear glass. In Windsor, traveling the long walk. So many people along the route throwing flowers in honor of their queen.
Look at all the flowers that are there on the hearse.
Arriving at Windsor Castle, the view of the crowds through the archway.
Look at that view. Look at that view.
Extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
And waiting there, members of the royal family, even Queen Elizabeth's corgis, waiting for the Queen's arrival. The Reverend Dr. Ian Greenshields, who shared dinner with the Queen the weekend before she died while he was visiting Balmoral. And he told us today her memory was as sharp as ever. She was engaged in conversation, and he told us about her walk to the window.
She took me over to the window and she was just showing me the different gardens and flower beds that were there, and just pointing out just the estate that brought her so much comfort and peace in her life. She spoke of it and said that she'd no regrets having started that journey of faith. She had no regrets at all.
No regrets for a queen who pledged to serve as a young woman. Inside St. George's Chapel, the finality of this moment in history. The scepter and orb carefully taken off the coffin. Then the imperial state crown removed, marking the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign. The Lord Chamberlain, the most senior role appointed by the royal household, breaking his wand to signify the end of service to the Queen. The coffin lowered into the royal vault. The Queen's piper playing his final song for the Queen, the music hanging in the air, fading into the distance as he walked away. Then, inside the chapel, God Save the King. Tonight, the Queen has been laid to rest with her mother and father and sister, Princess Margaret, and she is now alongside her husband of 73 years, the late Prince Philip. And as the world said goodbye to the Queen today, we remembered what she said not so long ago during the pandemic, words that are just as meaningful tonight.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
It was profoundly moving here today, and we thought of the Queen's words while we were on the air. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. I want to bring in our foreign correspondent, James Longman. And James, we were all on the air together today. We know tonight, long after the cameras, that private service with just the family, their final goodbye. And of course, Queen Elizabeth reunited with her husband of 73 years.
Yeah, David, after all the excitement and pomp and pageantry of a very public day, the last moments were for the family alone. Elizabeth was finally reunited with her great love, Prince Philip. He'd been waiting for her in the Royal Vault in St George's Chapel since his death last year. And tonight they were buried side by side along with her father, King George, mother Elizabeth and sister Margaret. And in the private burial, as night fell, a private ceremony took place. The tradition is for the new monarch to take a little earth collected from every part of the United Kingdom and scatter it onto their predecessor. It was a final tribute to a queen and a wife returning to her beloved. David.
Just an extraordinary life. James Longman, thank you. Deborah Roberts also with us. And of course, Deborah, she was the queen, but she was also a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and how proud she would have been of her family today.
And you couldn't forget that. As excruciating as this time probably was, David, it was defined by family. And I spoke with King Charles' former communications director, who says no doubt this new king drew strength from seeing his family together. William and Harry putting aside their differences, accompanying their grandmother's coffin at that vigil with their cousins, a first really with these grandkids. But that image today that most of us will never forget, George, 9-year-old George, who is heir to the throne, and his 7-year-old sister is Charlotte in that little black hat, also there at the funeral and reminding us of the future of this monarchy and, of course, that this is, at the end of the day, about family.
Deborah Roberts, it's been wonderful to have you here as well. Thank you, Deb. Our thanks to Deborah, to James Longman, and our entire team today. Our thanks to everyone for their thoughtful, careful coverage.